This is Link Engineering's video conversation series. This program is Playful Learning, Making Engineering Fun with AnnMarie Thomas and Alison Haugh.
Hello, Alison. Can you say something? Let's see if we can hear you. Can you talk?
Okay, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Yes. Alison is an amazing fifth grade teacher who's going to be presenting with us today.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Shelley Latham, and I'm the community manager at linkengineering.org. Link Engineering is a engineering educator exchange. It's a place where you can connect with resources for engineering education, and that's what we're doing here today. I'm going to introduce our guests today. We've got AnnMarie Thomas. She's an associate professor at the University of at the School of Engineering and Opus College of Business at the University of St. Thomas. She's the founder and director of the Playful Learning Lab, where she and her students created squishy circuits, among other projects. AnnMarie co-founded and co-directs the University of St. Thomas Center for Engineering Education, CEE, which offers engineering courses for P through 12 educators and conducts research on engineering at the pre-collegiate level. She is the author of Making Makers, Kids, Tools, and the Future of Innovation. And she and her students recently collaborated with OKGo to create OKGo Sandbox, a website with STEM lessons based on the very popular OKGo music videos. And if you have not checked that out, after you're done here, just go, go, go. It is so fantastic and so much fun and very inspiring. So we're absolutely thrilled to have you here, AnnMarie. I know you're very busy.
It's to be here too.
We really love having you. Joining her is Alison Haugh,
Yes.
who's a fourth grade teacher at Glacier Hills Elementary School of Arts and Science in Minnesota, where she regularly integrates inquiry and hands-on learning with STEM in her classroom. Alison graduated from the University of St. Thomas with degrees in elementary education, STEM education, and a focus in engineering education. Her undergraduate research with the Playful Learning Lab focused on expanding quality engineering education with an eye to underserved populations, including students with disabilities, emphasizing learning through play. Okay, let's see, we've got people coming in from all over the place. Australia, wow. That's impressive. Good day.
Hi, Michelle.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to AnnMarie, who's going to just tell us what she's been doing and what her experiences with playful learning is.
Awesome, and I'm seeing some comments here. So it looks like Jerry works with all PK through 12, and it looks like we also have some folks from museums. So
Great.
I love this because that's really the work that we've done in the lab, and it's such an honor to have Alison presenting because she worked in the lab through its crucial years and is now actually out in her own classroom using a lot of these methods. As Shelley mentioned, I run a lab on play and learning, but my PhD is in engineering. And it's sort of a circuitous path to get there. I have to admit that a lot of people were a little confused when suddenly my research was about Play-Doh. And really for us, it's about how do we engage everyone with learning. And while obviously we spend a lot of our time focusing on kids and how to engage kids, so yeah, I've got some props, but the squishy circuits was always, I always say this is one of the times the lab started, and I didn't even really realize at the time how we were starting the lab. But we were looking for a way to play with my own daughters with engineering, and it was a fun side project. But what I found was that when I was explaining circuitry with Play-Dohs, I was more engaged. And really at the heart of what we do with this concept of play is create engaging learning, not just for the students, but also for the teachers. Because any of you who are in a classroom day in, day out, you know how hard sometimes it is to be joyful and excited when you're teaching the same thing for the 10th year or the 12th year. I think I'm currently teaching my engineering design intro class for the 28th time. And so one of the things that we try really hard to do is figure out how do we make this so that you have these elements of play, not just for the students, but something that you can enjoy doing as the educator. Some ways for you to be surprised by things. The little shorthand that we do with the lab is for something to be playful to our lab, and there are many people who have their own definitions. We look for how do we have some way of finding joy in a project. So I would say look for the laughter. How do you find joy? How do you find some element of surprise? for the students? What is an element of surprise? What is an element of whimsy? And then how do we bring in new people? So we spent a lot of time looking at ways to collaborate. And as Shelley mentioned, so much of our work has been collaborative because engineering isn't a discipline that we can do in a silo, right? Engineering only makes sense when you're solving real problems or you're hearing how it relates to the rest of the world. And so we try to make those partnerships integral to everything we do. And these days, and I've seen a couple people have commented on it, so maybe we'll start there we'll start with this project, which is this OK Go project. And the OK Go project is really probably the biggest one our lab is working on currently, and frankly, probably the biggest we've ever done. So we are working with the band OK Go. I'll try to do little props. I've got our stickers. If you want a sticker, email me and I'll send you stickers. If you can find my email online and email me, I will send you some stickers. We have lots of lovely OK Go stickers. And Sandbox came out of, so if you're not familiar with OK Go, you should Google them and you should go on YouTube. And they are a rock band with a very interesting backstory. They actually met at summer camp, two of them when they were 10, and they've been together for 20 years. And even they will admit that most people know them as the video band. You may have seen them on treadmills, but they create these innovative videos that use a heck of a lot of engineering and creativity. So they've done one where they filmed the entire thing in microgravity in parabolas on a Russian vomit comet. They filmed another where they rigged a car with robotic arms, and they played the entire song by stunt driving the car through a course that had instruments along the way. They did one where they created a 4-minute long Rube Goldberg device. They did another one where the whole video took place in 4 seconds and then they slowed it down. And I have been watching these videos in my engineering education classes for years. I teach engineering students, but one of my other hats is that I'm the co-founder and innovation director for the Center for Engineering Education at our university. So a third of the teaching I do at the university is actually the K-12 teachers in person and online in a graduate program teaching how to teach integrated STEAM and engineering. And in those classes, I was using OK Go's videos for years. Love their videos, can see the engineering in them, can see simple machines, can see visualization. And by chance last year, I ran into their lead singer at a conference. We both drink way too much coffee. So we were both always found with a coffee cup. And we started talking about what we both did. And I was very well versed with what the band did. But it turns out that teachers have been writing to the band for years, telling them how they use the videos in their own classes in elementary school and asking for more materials from them. Shockingly, rock bands aren't trained in education. So they were looking for partners. And that is kind of at the heart of, when we look at play, we look at who are our playmates, who can we work with? So the last roughly 7 months has been this whirlwind between my lab, the Playful Learning Lab, and OK Go. And just a month ago, we launched OK Go Sandbox. So if you go to www.okgosandbox.org, it is a new website just for teachers and educators that uses the videos as jumping off points to do your own design challenges, to explain principles like simple machines, principles like gravity and parabolas. But the fun thing is that all of the materials there, we have tested in classrooms. Each of the videos that we've put out, actually we've had at least 30 teachers look at before we did the final version to make sure that it was something that could be useful in a classroom. And there's no swearing or inappropriate moments in the videos, which you can't always assume is the case if you go on YouTube, even with our beloved band. But OK Go Sandbox is our classroom safe place that really is focused on creating discussion and inquiry and project-based learning around the music videos. And we currently have 14 classroom-ready videos, including 10 activities with teacher guides. They're around one video that is on the Rube Goldberg device, so it's all about chain reactions, and it's also about simple machines. We have another series of exercises that are about gravity and dropping things. And then we have another series that looks at using the Google Science Journal app, which is an app that lets you use the sensors on your phone. And it lets you use that to create music by, for example, playing the compass so that the compass plays, so the higher note is played when you turn the compass, for example. Or a light sensor where you can map pitch to how much light is showing. So that's been a really fun project, and it's actually one where I'd love to take all of you and ask you for your help, because we really have done it as a conversation with teachers. Every time we have filmed with the band, we have had an elementary school teacher on set, and every exercise that we posted on the website has been run in numerous classrooms before we do it. And then we also really have been polling teachers, actually hundreds of them now, on which topics, what words, what ideas they'd like to see on the website. And thanks to our sponsors, we actually are working on planning the next round of content. So if you have some ideas, we would love to hear from you. And I'm seeing the comment, one of the comments about looking to partner and work with OKGo and PD. You can reach out to us through OKGo Sandbox. They still are a rock band, so they tour quite a bit and are rather busy. But one of the things that we're looking at is ways that they can virtually visit classrooms and ways that they can answer questions that are posed to them. So please reach out to us. Myself and other Playful Learning Lab members are happy to chat. We answer all the email. But Allison, I would love to hear from you a little bit about how, so Allison is someone who worked very closely with the Playful Learning Lab for 3 years, particularly on developing some of our music activities and squishy circuits and our curriculum around that. So if you ever go to the Squishy Circuits website, the free curriculum there, which has like cute little cartoons and is mapped to next generation science standards, Allison is actually the person who wrote that. So I would love to hear your thoughts on how this all ties into being a 4th grade teacher.
Yeah, I would love to share about it some more. So one of the things that you really brought up when you were talking about, engineering and education and playful learning is the idea of having joy and wonder and surprise. And I think that's incredibly important in getting students to care about learning and to be engaged. But then you mentioned how in the Engineering for Educator classes that I took, you showed the OKGo videos. And so now as a teacher, we watch one OKGo video every single day before we leave at the end of the day in my classroom. And we don't always do something with it. Sometimes we just have time to watch the video. But what it does for my students is it gives them that joy and that wonder and the surprise that you were talking about that's essential for playful learning. And my favorite thing about it is the wonder, because my students then leave at the end of the day with this wonder, and they are bringing it home to their families and to their friends, talking about, I wonder how they did that, or I want to figure this out. So they come in the next day, or we'll do design challenges or engineering challenges in coming weeks, and they're able to go back and say, oh, I wonder if this is connected to that video we watched, or, and so they're able to make those links. And I've noticed that using OKGo videos, or really just any kind of video or playful experience, gives my students the motivation they need to be more advanced learners and to take their learning a step further. So
I think one of the things that we've really tried for with Sandbox is that people know OKGo as the video band and they show their beautiful videos. But one of the things we notice in talking to kids is it seems almost effortless because you see the finished video. You see this amazing final video, and it would be easy to imagine that the band goes from a microgravity plane over to stop motion animation, and then they run off and play with paint. Where really any of the videos they do typically take between 80 and 120 takes. That can take months and months and months and go horribly awry in the process. And so one of the stories that I've loved taking out of this project is the persistence that is involved. And another thing that we map to play is when you talk about play, play is a process. Play is not about the final outcome. When I do corporate advising and they want to create a playful environment, often the first thing you hear is beanbags and colorful walls. And while I'm very proud of my colorful office, my office is not colorful because it started that way. It's because it grew that way. They're all real projects that we've done. And so sometimes I've seen places that try to create a playful atmosphere by, again, painting something, or beanbag chairs are the go-to for a lot of companies, when really that it's not that easy. Play is more about this sense of joy and inquiry. And if you want to encourage a playful environment, be it in your company, be it in your classroom, be it in your lab, it's also heavily about taking a risk together. You can't be guaranteed that you're going to have a final fantastic outcome of being playful, except for the experience. An example I use for that is about 2 years ago. We also do a lot of work with chefs, and we did a project with a pastry chef creating a cake that would be an interactive cake. So a musical cake that would respond to touch and explode edible confetti and, ideally light up. And that's something that those of us who do lots of electrical engineering could have designed perfectly. But we made a very strategic decision to make it a lab project, make it a group project, and have everyone be able to voice their ideas and try things, even if they were things that seemed like odd choices or things that might not work. And the scary thing as the person whose project it is that you have to let go and be okay with the fact that you might not have the end result you want. But the process is really the important thing there. And that is hard if you're an educator who also has to map to standards or come up with a rubric. And so I spend a lot of time in the classes that I teach on engineering design for K-12 talking about what is it that you're really trying to assess, right? A question that we use a lot is, if you are giving your students a design project, can they get a great grade? Can they get an A, even if it doesn't work at the end? And that seems like a really straightforward question, but let it sink in for a second. If you're giving a design challenge to your students that they've never done before, can they still get an A on this project if it doesn't work at the end? I would say in my own classes, the answer is yes, because I want them to learn process. And if I assume that it has to work at the end, then my students have to know how to scaffold and how to pick a achievable project before they've done the project. And I can't assume that, right? So that's where I have to really put my money where my mouth is in terms of saying that it's about process and make sure that my rubrics let my students explore. I don't know, Allison, if you have anything to chime in on that.
I do, yes. I think what you were saying about, having students be able to get, an A if they don't complete a project to specific expectations, that I think they should still be able to be. They've worked through the process. The big thing is we're teaching students how to use tools and how to work through problems, not necessarily how to memorize. And I think we all know from experience, it takes multiple tries to get something to where you want it to be. And I think it is about that process. And I see it every day with my students. My students, when I think back to some of the activities we've done in the classroom, remember things, challenges where they failed. And they're always working in groups too, which I think is important, but where they failed because they go back and they have to think about it, rather than where they were following a very specific, written procedure. Not to say that those don't have a great place in some situations, but my students seem to remember far more what they learn when they're not always successful, or they're successful in a different way than they thought, rather than because they're trying and exploring, rather than following specific instructions that were written out for them.
And this leads to a question from Linda, actually, that I think actually ties to exactly what you just said. And Allison, you're probably even better posed to answer it than I am, which is, how does the work that we do in the lab bring new youth into engineering and technology, particularly girls and underrepresented youth? And that's actually something that Allison worked on heavily when she was in the lab. One of the programs that my university has done for years is something called STEPS. And it's a summer technology engineering preview for girls in the summer. And it was fascinating. When I inherited the program, it was an overnight week-long camp, or 5-day camp, that was for girls on our campus that was focused on making airplanes. They built model airplanes and then flew them. And one of the challenges the university had for a while was that our diversity numbers on this were not where we wanted them to be. And if you look at the demographics, we're in the Twin Cities. We have the largest Somali and then the second largest Hmong populations in the country. Those aren't represented by our university. Our university was predominantly white at the time. And what we were finding were the kids that came to the camp, even though it were free, tended to be from upper middle class families and kids who had a lot of these opportunities. And we loved having them there. But it really wasn't the group that we were trying to attract. And we spent a lot of time looking at how might we change programs to be more attractive to particularly these youth that were underrepresented, and in many cases were very representative of our community in the city, but not at the university. And there were some basic things we did, like if you're from a family that hasn't gone to college, dropping your kid off at camp for 5 days without a cell phone is intimidating. So we actually then tried something where we partnered with the public library system and did a day camp based on the local libraries so that families didn't have to travel and kids could walk to the camps. But we also did a lot of looking at, okay, aerospace technology. Our university doesn't have aerospace. And if we looked at the demographics of the volunteers that we brought in to do that, they did not look like or have life experiences like the kids that we were trying to reach. So Allison, do you want to talk to what we ended up doing for the camp instead, since you ran it?
Sure. So what we ended up changing the camp to be was a one-day camp. So there were multiple sessions, but each session was just a single day, 12 or 13 hours. They were long days, so we got a lot of great information and great activities in that single day. But because of that, we were able to reach a larger audience for the camp, and we had students from all different backgrounds that were able to attend. We worked, like AnnMarie said, with the public library, who had the resources that maybe we didn't have to reach out to these families that we were trying to target to draw into the engineering camp that we were putting on. So it was the one-day camp, and it targeted young girls from all over the Twin Cities. It was great to see. What was really cool to see at the camp was how these people from so many different walks of life came together and laughed and had fun and explored and got their hands dirty. You know, we did squishy circuits for one of the activities to kind of warm up as an icebreaker, and they actually made their own dough. And to see some of these students or these campers come in and get their hands dirty in flour and food dye and have it spill all over the floor and laugh about it, you know, and see them realize that, wow, I've always thought engineering was something different. You know, I didn't know that it could be something where I could really get my hands dirty and have fun with friends. And I think that one-day camp attracting a larger audience really let us help students have more meaningful experiences.
And by being in the library, it was a place that they could go back to after the camp ended and still use that equipment and use the create spaces in the libraries, as opposed to being a camp where they went away somewhere and then it was over. And that was pretty intentional. Also, moving away from the airplanes, the students couldn't leave. They could leave with their plane, but they couldn't leave with the remote control. So that old model meant they left with something that didn't work. And so we moved to, some people would say, more arts and crafts and lower tech projects. But the goal for us was that every girl who left our camp left with it working. So a little art bot or something they made, but something that still worked when they went home. And there was a lot of angst from the community, actually, that we were no longer doing these showy planes that could only be flown on special fields with special equipment. But we found actually a stronger staying power in the fact that it was something that they could do at home. It was materials that they could use. You don't have to go somewhere special to be an engineer. Was a message that Alison and her team worked really hard to get across. And I see Nancy as a librarian. We love working with libraries, particularly in cities. We have found that libraries are the hub of learning. And as we see communities changing and libraries changing, we see more gatherings at libraries. I spent some time in rural Minnesota. And one of the things I love is that some of our libraries, they don't just check out books, they might check out pie tins, and they might check out, you know, quilt patterns. And you really can create this hub of making and hands-on learning around a community.
I think one of the coolest things that I've noticed in my classroom, so I'm at an arts and science magnet school, but what I've noticed from being there in that community, but then also working with the STEPS camp, is realizing how we can use recyclable materials to make something new. And that was something that was really powerful for these campers that didn't have necessarily a whole lot of money to go out and buy these fancy engineering and STEM kits. And so that was really cool for them to see. The other thing that was really nice about the camps and having the single day camps and bringing in people from all over was, like AnnMarie said, the lab tries to work with new people. That was kind of a smaller scale of getting these campers to work with new people that they haven't met before. And that translates for me into my classroom and education with fitting cultural proficiency and, you know, helping students create a wider worldview too.
I'm loving all these conversations and the side notes here about the roles that libraries play. Again, I think that is one of, I think for informal education, I think libraries are such an amazing resource for many of us. We are blessed in the cities here to have a great, robust library system that gives students and learners of any age a lot of resources. There's also a great question here that is from Gordon. For participants, in your state, are middle school or high school faculty of engineering required to have specific state endorsement or credential? That's a fascinating question. I'd love to see answers. Shelley, I don't know if we can like make that a Q and like one of the survey ones.
Oh, yeah. Let me, I think I can whip up a poll.
If not, just chime in here. But
yeah, maybe just chime in.
Yeah, Gordon, I will say in Minnesota, no, we do not have that yet. And so that, in some ways, that's freeing, because I think engineering ties into so many subjects. It's nice to see that we can tie them to these things. I think if you look at the next generation science standards that are coming, I think the way the next generation science standards for states that are adopting that, engineering is going to be integrated, not just middle school and high school. We're going to see it all the way through. That I think is partially why you're starting to see schools of education starting to offer programs. Again, that's a big part of why we started our program at this university for teachers, was because it was required in our state for teachers to teach it, and there wasn't a separate licensure. So if you had to teach engineering standards, you had to find it yourself. And that interestingly, that's actually also why our university's engineering education program, I'm now teaching our classes online, as are my partners, because so many states are going that route, and we are finding actually that a lot of schools of education around the country don't have that. So I'm seeing some replies already. Yes and no. If you have math or physics, they will let you skip the endorsements. It's really a state-by-state thing right now. So it's really fascinating. Oh, and Doug's chipping in. Actually, Doug is our, I'm going to get it wrong, but Doug is at our Minnesota Department of Education and handles accreditation. And so let's see, Doug says, nor will they have that endorsement or licensure in Minnesota in the near future. The flexibility provides a lot of options. Most engineering classes are taught by CTE or science licensure teachers. Okay. And Iowa is also a no from Gordon, but often groomed from other voc tech instructors. I will say part of why I'm passionate about teaching the classes that I teach for teachers is because there are many engineering curricula that are taught in high schools that ask for colleges to give credit for our intro level engineering class. And so sometimes students who have taken certain programs in high school, they're asking to skip the freshman engineering class. And that's challenging actually to me, because at a university, I've been teaching engineering 14 years now. I started in art school teaching engineer to artists, and I've been in an engineering school for 12. Our freshman classes are typically the introduction to the profession. They're typically the introduction to the culture, to the creativity, to the ideation. And what I have seen in a lot of cases are engineering classes taught by teachers who have never taken an engineering class at the college level. And so this is specifically for teaching an engineering class that your high school wants to count as a college class. And that I think is a missed opportunity, because the olden version of what people thought engineers were, let's face it, it wasn't playful. It probably wasn't me. So one thing that I want to make very clear when I talk to teachers is that I was never a straight A student. I have a degree from MIT and a PhD from Caltech, and I've done fun things, and I'm very lucky. And it's amazing to me how many high school students and how many teachers assume that I was always the straight A kid who got everything right. I have never been the straight A student who got everything right. In fact, I should post my GPAs on my website, and I think I will. I had a 2.8 in grad school. I was the kid who spent every time in office hours working like mad to barely break even. And I was not the classically good at math and science kid, but I also didn't love math. I took all the classes, and I've heard a lot of students come to me and say, oh, I don't think I can be an engineer because I don't love math, or I'm not the best at math. And I think that's the wrong message. I have a lot of friends who are novelists, and I have never had a friend who is a novelist tell me that they are a novelist because they love grammar. Right? That's not, but they're good at grammar. They all took grammar. They all work on it. They work with editors. They work hard at it. But I've never heard a novelist tell me that they're a novelist because they love grammar, right? And I think that's an important message. You can work very hard at something and be good enough at it to use it as a tool without being the best at it. And historically, we used to tell kids you had to be the best in math or science to be an engineer, right? The look left, look right. One of you isn't going to be here at the end of the semester. That narrows who our engineers are, right? That narrows the ideas that we get. I would so much rather see the kid who's struggling with the math and science, but is willing to put the extra work in and get good enough to use it, but still have, just like that novelist, these life stories they want to tell through using those tools. So to me, it's really important how we introduce engineering to students. And if we're going to call something an engineering class, I would so love there'd be resources for those teachers to be able to actually get a taste of real engineering. Which is why I love things like Link Engineering that is actually letting you work with real engineers and see what that looks like. And that's not a failing. Obviously, that's something that I think falls on our departments of education and our schools of education to really help create those experiences for teachers.
Can I jump in?
A long answer, Gordon. Sorry. Allison.
Yes, can I jump in if that's all right? So a lot of what you were saying about not being a straight A student reminded me of my own experience. So my parents are teachers, long story short, and my mom pushed me to try out the Center for Engineering Education at St. Thomas. And it was out of my comfort zone because my dad's a calc teacher, and I hated math and I hated science. And it wasn't until I started taking engineering courses, because my mom, who is always right, pushed me to give it a shot. And I did. And now my students would tell anybody in a heartbeat that my favorite thing are science and engineering and math. And it all started because the Center for Engineering and what we worked on in the Playful Learning Lab really was that sense of wonder and joy and working with other people. And remembering, and I still remember the day when in class, I realized that I didn't have to be good at math. It didn't have to come natural to me to enjoy engineering, that I would have to work at it. But the wonder that I felt and the desire to learn more through engineering led me to push myself in math and science classes, so that I did pursue the degree that I ended up going for. And I think that also kind of fits with, I want to say, was it Linda's question earlier too, how your work is bringing new youth to engineering and technology, and girls and underrepresented youth, and bringing in that motivation of what people care about. I really like crafts and design and art and things like that. And that was the motivation that brought me in as somebody who previously thought that, nope, no way is engineering for me. And that's where I think the playful learning is really powerful, because it can bring in these students who have, misconceptions, for lack of a better word, of what an engineer does.
I have a question for both of you. It's like, how do you define engineering? How do you say what an engineering is? Or because I think that is a question. Like I think a lot of people aren't, whether they're educators who don't have a lot of exposure to it, or whether they're just lay people. You ask 5 people, you're going to get kind of 5 different, very vague answers, perhaps. So I'm just curious how, with your getting into it not from a super strong math and science background, how do you describe it and define it to people?
So that's one of the first things when I teach my fundamentals of engineering class for teachers. I always start with a paper that was published not too long ago in the Journal of Engineering Education that basically proved that even engineering professors couldn't define our field. Right. So I would say, like, that should take a lot of pressure off of all of you if even those of us who do it can't define our field, because it means that there isn't one right answer. I'm drawing a picture. So here is my answer. This is my answer. Hopefully this flips. Let's see. Is it? Okay. Yeah. I always say that engineering is the intersection of math and science, creative problem solving, and making and breaking. And I have a hat that used to do a lot of work in the making world and still does. I took a year off from being a professor to be the founding executive director for Maker Education Initiative, and worked nationally on the nonprofit level with making. And making is awesome, but it's not engineering. Also known to say, if someone designs the medical device that saves my family member's life, and they design it out of popsicle sticks while dreaming it up in the shower, that's awesome to me. However, that will never happen because it won't get to the hospital, right? To get something to medical device level, we have to go through FDA testing, and we have to prove that it'll work. And that's where the math and science come in, and the documentation. So all 3 of those skills on their own, but it's that heart center where you take the math and science, you apply it to creative problem solving, and that being able to make and break it. To me, that's engineering. It's a little messy because I have to draw a picture. I can't just answer it. How about you, Allison? What do you tell your students?
I think I would agree a lot with what you said about having all of those parts be necessary to really bring in engineering. We talk a lot at our school and in our classroom of that everything, if things can be integrated, which is kind of a big, buzzword in education right now, we're going to be more efficient altogether. And so I would say engineering, like you said, AnnMarie, really incorporates the math and the science. and problem solving and kind of thinking outside the box. But the only other thing that I would think I would add, and that I really emphasize in my classroom, is the collaboration that, to me, I feel is necessary as well. And especially at, a K-6 level, when community building is so important, having that ability to work together and using everybody's skills, and letting people explore skills that maybe they're not comfortable in either. So maybe, you take the students who are really high in math or feel like they really thrive in math, and the students who really feel like they thrive in art and design, and let them use those skills, but then have them swap as well. And so that everybody's getting a chance to kind of explore all those different aspects that make engineering what it is.
So there's a question from Gordon about how is the Playful Learning Lab resonating in K-6 pre-service education degree programs? I actually don't know, because our Playful Learning Lab really is just my little research group here. Typically I have 12 to 15 research students. They're all undergraduates. Once in a blue moon, I'll take an art history graduate student to help curate a show. But the lab that has created all this work, in fact, all that you see on OK Go Sandbox, they are undergraduates. And the most direct way that it affects pre-service is usually half my lab is education, or a third of my lab is education students. We practice what we preach. So in our lab, we are a pretty diverse bunch. We have students from the School of Engineering, we have students from the College of Arts and Science, we have students from the business school, we have students from the education school, and they all work together on projects. And so in my own little tiny microscopic world, that is how it's affecting our P6 pre-service education, is that we're probably one of the largest employers at our university of education students. But that's still a very small drop in the bucket. In terms of the larger picture, we hear pretty regularly from schools that are using our materials, particularly squishy circuits, which, is open source. One of my former students started a company and sells kits, so I am now a little more out removed from that. I would say our biggest impact, other than our immediate students, is one thing we do. Any of you in Minnesota are invited. Our lab hosts once a month a play date for educators. Because the dirty secret about running a lab on play is the first question that everybody asks me, or they don't even ask, they just say, "You're so lucky you have the funnest job in the world." And I never know how to answer that, because I have the best job for me and it's empowering and I love it, but the hours are crazy and the stress is really high. And to be perfectly blunt, it's not always a lot of fun, or usually a lot of fun even. And what I tell teachers is that we know that when you're running a field trip for 28 second graders and everyone thinks it's the best time ever at the zoo, your job is stressful. You're doing head counts, you're making sure that the peanut allergies don't get the peanut snack, and we know that. And I think there's this pressure that you're supposed to be having fun in the moment too. You can be a powerful educator who creates play for other people and not have fun in the moment. But the flip side of that is, for you to continue being a playful person, you really need to make sure that you're finding ways to play. And so personally, I did two different ways of that for myself. Now that my lab has gotten big and I teach in the business school and the engineering school and the education school, I needed to then reclaim my playtime with other people in these rules. And I set up two things. One is that we host a play date once a month at the university or elsewhere, and invite any educator who finds us to come. And so we've had upwards of 30 sometimes, and we have show and tell, and we have cookies, and we do stuff. People bring things from their classroom, we build things. Sometimes we go to the circus and put sensors on. That's one. The other one for me is to keep learning, was that I realized I could never be in a book club because I would never read the book in time. So every year I find 9 people that I want to get to know better. And we meet up once a month online, Google Hangouts, and we have what we call an artist salon. But we can do it in our pajamas because we're all in different time zones. And whoever's hosting that month mails everybody else a box. So usually I have a K-12 teacher, and I've usually got some artists or musicians, and a box shows up and we open it together, and we only have to commit to 90 minutes, and we don't have to do any homework in advance because there's no book to read, and we play. And I have found that that's crucial for me to keep bringing new ideas to the lab, is to make sure that outside of the lab, I'm still getting to be the person playing. Because when you are the one running the facilitating, you are probably not playing. Right, Allison?
Yes, definitely. But I mean, I do have to say it is important to still find those times to let yourself wander along with your students and explore with your students too, because it makes it a lot easier.
So a question that came up is, are grad students doing research papers on Playful Learning Lab? So conveniently, well, maybe conveniently, students are doing research papers. Alison has authored many. We go through the full IRB process and do research on the programs that we run, things like that STEPS program she mentioned. So we actually have published quite a bit. They're just not grad students. As many of you who work in K-12 know, that if you give your students expectations and obligations beyond their grade level, they often will rise to meet the occasion. So there's often this confusion that I have postdocs. Actually, they're usually like sophomores. We also partner quite a bit with other universities. So things like squishy circuits have been researched pretty heavily. Dr. Kylie Pepler at the University of Indiana does amazing research on creativity. If you're familiar with Scratch, she's done a lot of research on Scratch. Her students have done some research on the work out of our lab, squishy circuits. So we definitely believe in research-based outcomes. And I also have a colleague, actually the director of the Center for Engineering Education, Dr. Deb Besser here at University of St. Thomas. She leads a lot of our research. Thankfully, she is one of the few professional engineers who also has a PhD in education. So I get to learn a ton from her on the research side that frankly wouldn't be my strong suit. It is not the background that I have. Thank you, Gordon, for commenting on the keyboard. Yes, if we're gonna do music projects, you have to have a nice keyboard.
Well, we've only got a few minutes left, but as somebody who AnnMarie, you and I were talking about a little bit earlier, who has my teaching background is theater, and finding that balance between letting kids really just explore, be creative, not constrained, not controlled, so that they feel free to do something new and something that maybe they're not comfortable with, but also needing to bring in the discipline and the focus and the goal and what you're working on. How do you balance that, and how do you, I guess, do you have a sort of go-to playful you know, starter or thing that just loosens people up, loosens kids up?
Alison.
To kind of get my kids, so just to rephrase, make sure I'm understanding correctly, to get my students kind of into the activities themselves and into playful learning?
Yeah, well, just what are the, what's, do you have a sort of go-to sort of playful activity that sort of gets them excited and focused, and then do you transition into an actual project or a you know, I guess that's my...
No, that's a great question, and actually something that I've thought a lot about and talked a lot about with our STEM specialist at the school I'm at is, you know, how to work with students to get them motivated. So sometimes it makes sense to start with a book before an activity, and then it gives students a problem. For example, we worked a lot this year. Our science standards in 4th grade focus on water. And so we read the book, Long Walk to Water, about a drought, or about building a well in Sudan. And we read that story to kind of hook students and bring them into a real problem. And that was their motivation. And then we actually worked, our science specialist created a lesson that had students build water filters. So it connected directly to this book, and the students were incredibly engaged because there was this book that we were reading based sort of on a true story. And so that's one way, is to start, we started with books and hooked them that way, or with articles. You know, we're currently studying bacteria and viruses and germology. And so we read an article about New York City street rats with bacteria, you know, something totally just kind of out of the blue, but it got my students like, oh, we need to find a way to fix this. Whereas other times I'll start with an activity and see what questions they come up with, what problems they notice. And I think that's also incredibly powerful and a way to start. I started the first day of school this year, and we're going to end it doing the spaghetti challenge, which we had done in AnnMarie's class as a college student as well, and building towers out of 20 pieces of spaghetti and masking tape, and having it, the tallest tower have a marshmallow on top. And that was September, and it's now May, and my students still bring it up and talk about it. And so that's a great hook at the beginning of the year. to get students kind of thinking critically and working together. One thing I really emphasize too is posing a problem that fits so students can follow the engineering design process. There's a ton of different iterations of the engineering design process. But the general process, giving them a problem. So whether that's through reading a book or having students discover their own problem. But one thing that I've found to be difficult this year is figuring out how to help students narrow down their focus. If I just were to say, I want you to solve a problem for something about water, it doesn't work incredibly well. They're not gonna have a very easy time thinking about problems that need to be solved. But if we instead start tracking all the different ways that you used water, it pulled students in to realizing what a problem was, and then they could start making the observations they needed to make, and then make a plan and prototype and test from there. So really, I think either starting with books or starting with some type of challenge that helps students create their own wonderings about.
I'll have to create a little plug here that might help your class too. But not even a plug for me, but out of Tufts, the Novel Engineering Project, which is about taking a story, reading a book, finding all the problems, and then picking one to solve, is a lovely way of tying in the stories, but then also the let's question storm, but then let's pick one and solve for it. I've loved that technique. That's been a really good.
So I've used novel engineering in my classroom. We did a Westlandia challenge in the fall. So we have it used to be called Girls in Engineering Day, but we changed it to something else at our school, and we did novel engineering. Cool. And to be quite honest, we looked at 2 pages of the book before the girls in my classroom were all over the supplies. They were just off. And I didn't stop them. I said, great. If you see something that you think you can fix, that you can work on, go for it. And then they came back and they looked at the book and kind of thought, oh, I didn't look at this the right way, or I didn't fully realize exactly what needed to be done. But they had this idea already, so they could then just go back, and think and change their thinking instead, which was really powerful too. You don't have to get all the way through. Maybe it's just showing a picture. What do you notice? What do you see? And go from there.
Awesome.
Yeah. Let's see.
Well, we are we're sort of coming to the end of our hour. If you've got any other comments or quick questions that you want to throw out there, I encourage you to do it now. It's been really wonderful to have everybody here. I want to thank absolutely AnnMarie and Alison. This has been so much fun. I want to be a student in both of your classes, which is not something that's likely to happen. So many great ideas.
Education classes are online. We'll take you, Shelley.
I know, and I love the shout out to the libraries, as it just so happens, because it was during library week, I put together a blog about STEM. Libraries opening door to STEM activities for learners of all ages. There's a lot of wonderful examples. Libraries are doing wonderful work. And I just want to, the rest of you, I just want to hope that if you're not members of Link Engineering, that you give it a look. And there's a lot of great resources there. And I'm just going to very quickly do a screen share here. Our next video conversation is with Christine Cunningham of Engineering is Elementary and the Museum of Science Boston. They've done incredible work over there. It's another great resource. She's got a book out that's just come out, Engineering and Elementary STEM Education. And she's going to be joined by Nancy Yocom de Romero, who is a longtime collaborator with her and Engineering is Elementary in working on that PK through 12 engineering curriculum. And so they're going to be talking about all those things, all the reasons that teachers think that they can't get engineering into the classroom. And they're going to have a lot of great practical suggestions about how you can deal with time management and materials and all of that. So I encourage you to join us for that, and we will be continuing these throughout the summer. So super excited to have you here. Hope to see you at linkengineering.org. A shout out to our sponsor Chevron and to our guest today. It's been really fun.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.